Gary Reese, this is a slideshow that I'm going to share with you, and I'm just going to talk through it just between me and you. You're the only person who's going to have a link to this. I didn't want to throw any curveballs at you. I wanted to make sure we're all on the same page and get your thoughts on this and your predictions. And I'm hoping, of course, and I think I asked you this, if there's a place at the McCullough room where we can project this. I showed a version of this to the school board the other night, and they kind of were on board with it. So anyway, let's get right into this. I'm going to start by talking about the goals of the meeting. Of course, there'll be some, introductory stuff and all that. But when we get into it, I say we want to define ed debt because the definition of ed debt has kind of drifted over the years. It started out paying off the debt for schools that had already been built. And then, of course, it became a savings account for future schools or future wings or future remodels or something like that. But over time, it has become something other than brick and mortar. For example, school buses are obviously not brick and mortar. Laptops, which I think were added in 2019, that's not brick and mortar. Some folks want to hold on to the old definition of ed debt, but I was hoping we could all come to some sort of consensus about what's in bounds for ed debt and what's out of bounds. And then I'm hoping we can set multi-year priorities, setting goals, what's important this year, looking at the future, and give the commission some sort of view of not only the coming year, but some years down the road, at least toward the end of this decade. And that's as much for the school board as for the commission. It's just not something we are used to dealing with. And then, of course, we want to establish expectations so that we can eliminate this idea of surprises. I think we've thrown so many surprises at the commission or the budget committee in the last few months that it's almost like the expectation is that you're going to get a surprise every month. And, of course, that has led to Walter getting a lot of traction. I said this the other night, and I told him, I said, you're becoming so believable, and a lot of people are listening to what you're saying, and we would like to not worry about you getting traction. And he kind of laughed about that. But we want some expectations so that nobody is throwing a curveball at the budget meeting every month. That's just something we want to eliminate. And that way we know what to expect, and so does the commission. And I hope this is the first of many meetings where we certainly meet in the springtime to talk about money and finance and expectations for the coming year, and to adjust the multi-year priorities and multi-year goals that we had set in prior years, because of course from year to year that's going to change. So those are our 4 goals for the meeting. The first thing I want to talk about is the new school, but you'll notice up here in the upper left hand corner I have a running total of the difference between what is in your current spreadsheet, or at least the last one I have, and what we would like to see happen in the 24-25. But I'm going to start by talking about the new school. And you will see here that as of right now, we have pushed the new school out to the 26-27 school year. But I don't think there's any risk, or very small risk, of pushing that on out into the next decade. And of course, our goal is to have $25-30 million as a down payment on the new school when it finally is needed. But we believe we can get through the rest of this decade without it being needed. So that gives us more breathing room to try to get to that goal. So we can take care of some priorities between now and then and still have a healthy down payment on a new school. Now that, of course, doesn't, because your 24-25 line is 0, and because we're asking for 0 from that line, that 0 stays the same in the upper left-hand corner. Now buses is another thing that we're not going to ask any changes on, but let's look at it. In 22-23, we had nothing. This year that we're in now, we spent over $1 million on propane buses. We believe that propane is the way to go. We talked to people in Montgomery County. They're very happy with their propane buses, and so propane is cleaner than diesel. It's cheaper than diesel to run, and so therefore that's probably what we're going to go for the next few years. Next year, you have assigned $1.9 million. You have allotted $1.9 million and some change there And that tells me that we're going to have a lot of buses, more than usual, come off the road in 24-25. But that's already allotted, $1.9 million. And then years after that, we got about $1 million and a little bit for the next few years toward the end of the decade. And of course, we don't know how much buses are going to cost. They could get cheaper theoretically. We don't even know what kind of advances might be made in technology. By the turn of the decade, we may be wanting to go all electric or something like that. I think the technology would have to develop quite a bit for us to want to do that as a board. But you see there where we are. But that's what you've got is fine. As far as we know, that's going to get us at least through 24-25. We may have to adjust that later. So again, in the upper left-hand corner, 0 extra money. So no change in that one either. So now let's talk about roofs. You'll see that in 22-23 we spent $200,000 on roofs. This current year we spent $1.8 million. Here's where an issue arises. We have $1 million allocated, or at least the commission has $1 million allocated out of ed debt. But we need to, in the coming year, replace the roofs at Sycamore Middle School and Harpeth Middle School. Cheatham Middle has been done. It's in one of those prior budget lines there. And so we got a discrepancy of about $2.6 million. Kyle told you in the last commission meeting that we did not have enough money in that line to complete what we needed to do. The good news is, after that, we go a number of years, at least through the rest of the decade, without having to do another roof replacement. We have 30-year warranties on these roofs, I think most of them. But that tells you, up here in the upper left-hand corner, you can see that now we're $2.6 million short of what you have in the line just to do the roofs. So we move on to HVAC, and we're carrying over the $2.6 million deficit. And then HVAC, we have a similar kind of problem as we had to roofs. You can see in 22-23 we spent $2.4 million, 23-24 we spent $2.8 million. 24-25 we spent $2.87 million, but to do what we need to do in 24-25 we need $3,304,926, and these are more recent numbers than the ones that you had here. They're updated numbers from the ones that you were given. Now, of course, this HVAC has suffered a great deal of inflation. In 25-26 we see a little bit of a savings there, because you got 3.1 million, but the new number comes in at 2.8. So that's good news. That's a good thing. But here we're back to bad news, because and there's even a savings in 26-27. But in 27-28, this is where things get, again, pretty bad news, because there's going to be 2 more years on that. And so again, looking out, I just want everybody to be prepared that 27, 28, 28, 29, y'all have no money allocated, but in those future years, that's $2.5 and $2.9 million down there. Because we're requesting 3.3 and you only have 2.8, that's about $500,000. But if you look in the upper left-hand corner, you will see that now we're up over $3 million as far as a discrepancy between what we need and what's been allocated in ed debt. That's just for 24-25. I want y'all to be aware that in future years, that number is going to be, that number is, of course, not going to be sufficient. 0 versus $2.5 million, 0 versus almost $3 million. So you might want to adjust that now and go ahead and know that that's what's going to be needed. Now, this has already been done this budget year, or will be by the time that next budget year rolls around, whatever's decided. But I did want to address this because of a couple of things. One, we voted at our board meeting to spend $500,000 out of fund balance, and that would leave y'all with a $2.5 million contributing share to the 4 restrooms and concession stands. Now, y'all had more money than that, actually, allocated in your spreadsheet. Of course, that was going to be spread over the next 4 years, but if you add all of those numbers together, that is less money than the $2.5 million. The only catch is we kind of need that this year, not next year, but this year. And if y'all see fit to do that out of ed debt, we would greatly appreciate it, of course. And so the 2425 number there, that $210,000, would come off what you have allocated for 2425. Now we will adjust for that 2.5 million later when we add all this up. But for right now, I'm just going to, if you look up here in the upper left-hand corner, I'm going to reduce that 3 million by 210,000, and that pulls us back down to $2.8 million. The laptops, of course, is an issue. It's not brick and mortar, and we certainly appreciate that since 2019, y'all have been pitching in to help with this. The lower grades have iPads, and we get that out of our funds on our side. We had an initiative to add laptops or give laptops to students, and we discovered that really, if you give them in the 5th grade, that it's just too much to expect that one laptop to last a 5th grader all the way to the time he ends his high school career. And so we doubled up on that. And I think where we fell short, even last year, this is the second year we've done that. You can see last year was $470,000, and y'all had to move some money into that fund to cover that. And then again this year, it seemed like, well, what do you mean? And you need this again? Well, of course we do, because every year there's a new crop of 5th graders and a new crop of 9th graders. And I don't think we explained that well enough, or there was a miscommunication, or I'm not sure how that happened. But now I hope everybody is aware that we need to do that for 2 years and not just one. And so that's the reason that has doubled from what you were expecting. And so I believe you pull some money back from 2425 to help make up with that 540. I think you pull some concession stand money too, if I'm not mistaken. But in any event, if you look in future years, this is not sufficient. That's sufficient probably for 1 grade, but not 2. And you'll see over on the left, y'all did some inflation. You figured laptops would cost more from 24, 25, 25, 26, that sort of thing. So this year, I'm just requesting the same amount that we did last year, 540. And then I just upped it to 570, about the same percentage as you were up in yours over on the left. Hopefully that'll be consistent, stable. Who knows what technology prices might do. It could even come down, but I think it's realistic to expect it'll be somewhere in that neighborhood to give 2 grades laptops over the next few years. But you'll see here there's a difference between the 166 and the 540. Again, we're just doing 24-25. This other stuff we'll come back and worry about that next year. But let's see how that changes our number here. And you see that that difference ups our grand total at this point to $3.1 million, almost $3.2 million. Now, paving was somehow mixed in with roofs. It was like roofs / paving. And we think it would be a good idea to separate that line into its own line, paving, sealing, and striping. And that, since that line has never existed, there will just be one line here. That I don't know how much money was actually spent on paving and stuff in the last 2 years, because it was part of that other line. That's reflected back up there in the roof line. But for our purposes, if this is separated out, there was nothing in 22, 23, 23, 24. And so $250,000 I think would help with that over the next couple of years, and then I've upped that to $300,000. I'm assuming there will be some inflation that will have an impact on that, like it does everything else. Cal points out that some years you're going to have horrible winters, which is going to leave a bunch of gatoring in our paving and a bunch of potholes and some issues. Other years, if we have relatively mild winters, we may not need to do much paving at all or sealing. But we do need to do the maintenance of the sealing on these parking lots on some sort of rotation to make sure they last as long as they can. And hopefully a lot of years, that's what most of this 250 will go toward. But hopefully that will add a new line. So this is, again, $250,000. You see our total is now up to $3.4 million for next year. Now the field lights, whenever we replace field lights, it's an old technology. We have to have trucks. It's kind of a dangerous thing to climb up there and do all this stuff. The new technology is LED lights. Those lights last 10 years. Once you get them up there, you shouldn't have to mess with them for 10 years. I don't know if they're warranted for that long, but I hope they are. And you can adjust them, change stuff about them from the ground remotely, and so nobody should have to climb up there and do anything, barring something really strange, a terrible windstorm or something like that, where they have to be reset. But it's more than just replacing old technology. Some of these stalks are dangerous. The light stalks, the light stands at West Cheatham, for example, are wooden. They're very old and they are rotting. And a good strong wind comes through there, and we're afraid the whole thing's going to come crashing down. Hopefully, during a thunderstorm in the middle of the night. But there is a possibility of people being under that, being injured. And we certainly want to address that. And so right now, I don't have estimates for that. Hopefully we can spread that out over a couple of years. Cal had some estimates on this, but they're like 2 or 3 years old. And of course, how inflation has gone. But by the meeting, hopefully he's going to have that for me to put into this chart here. And he can talk more about this or anything else that y'all need him to talk about. So I'm not going to adjust the green box on that, but I'm assuming, both of those years together, who knows? I wouldn't even guess $600,000, something like that, probably. So you might go ahead and up that box to 3.7, 3.8, 3.9 million to do the field lights. But that's something that, is needed. Certainly at West Cheatham, it's needed because it's a safety issue. Now, as I told you, we're bringing maintenance back in-house. And that's going to require us to spend quite a bit of money on the front end. We're going to have vehicles and tools, and we need a place for the maintenance folks to be based. We're going to hire 9 employees. Now, there's a savings year to year on the employees, quite a bit of savings actually, from about $900,000 down to about $600,000. That's once we get the necessary stuff to get going with it, the building. And the tools and the vehicles and all that stuff. And so the maintenance building is going to be a maintenance/storage building erected out near the bus garage, or actually attached to the bus garage, I think, the way the plans look. There was a storage building that was part of the original bus garage plans, from what I understand, and that got scrapped, but it's much needed, and this would be the time to probably add that. Carrie, you might be able to figure, based on the metal building that you built, I don't know the square footage. I think I heard 7,500 square foot, but I'm not sure about that. I can double check with Cal. He was going to get me an estimate, but you could probably go ahead and figure something in on that. And if we get the field light numbers and the maintenance numbers, I'll go ahead and add those green boxes and try to update those. But clearly we're knocking the heck out of $4 million. I do want to talk about this to the commission. I want to share with them this because I want them to know that this is a project we're doing without their help. We don't need anything out of ed debt. Of course, if y'all want to contribute, that'd be great. But we're not expecting that. We're going to pull this completely out of fund balance. And this is the type of stadium that we're doing. It's you see the aluminum bleachers over to the left, and this, of course, would be over to the right, too, outside the picture. These PSL-type seats in the middle, those seats we will sell at a premium, and programs, after a couple of years, these seats would pay for themselves. And then after that, everything is profit. And so, you could conceivably make, $500,000 over the next 8-10 years for these programs. And that's the reason that's a good thing. Nice press box up at the top, kind of like the one we got now. And then a track. You can see that in the foreground there. We want to go ahead and do a nice track for track and field. So this will be a real showplace for the central cluster of schools. And the reason that we're doing this, one of the reasons that it's imperative that we do this now, is because the structural engineer came back this week. Be a couple of weeks in the past when I actually present this, but the structural engineer said that our bleachers were unsafe, and he didn't want anybody standing on those bleachers jumping up and down because catastrophe could ensue, and we certainly don't want that. So we're going to take those bleachers down. We've got bids out for that now to demolish those. But this is very exciting. But again, there is nothing that we're asking from the commission to do this other than hopefully, show up on night one and help us inaugurate this wonderful, wonderful stadium that's will be opening, if all goes as well, in the fall of 2025. Okay, so we're going to talk about fund balance a little bit, how much we have, where a lot of this fund balance is going, how we're using fund balance to balance the coming budget. And I'm going to compare the percentage of the fund balance that we have to other school systems, to what TSBA recommends, which is 20%. With a $60 million budget, of course, 20% of that would be about $12 million. And we don't have that. And frankly, between me and you, I think that's kind of silly. But I think we can't define healthy fund balance because the board can't agree among themselves. This is just between me and you now. What a healthy fund balance is. I think if we got 7 to 8 million, we're okay. And John Patrick wants us to have the 20%, which would be 12 million, because that's what he heard at TSBA. But I think that's best practices. I can't imagine a scenario where we would need that kind of money in an emergency situation. That's something that we can discuss. And the reason I want to bring this up is because that'll be the first thing that Walter asked. And so we're going to go ahead and inoculate against that. And then after this slide, what I want to do is add another slide where it says how much is in ed debt now, and how much extra we're asking for, and how much is going to be put in ed debt for the 24-25, and get that number so that everybody can see that if they approve all of these requests at the end of next fiscal year, how much at that time should be the approximate balance in ed debt. And that might be the information that y'all would need to know to say whether all of these things are okay, or we're going to have to find some other way to do some of this stuff. And of course, we're always open to suggestions for any of this. That's the whole point of this meeting, is to collaborate. So anyway, I wanted you to see these slides, these numbers, and we can, and when you watch this, if you'll call me and talk to me about it or make notes, I would appreciate it.